Okay, so let's talk about something huge that happened about 200 years ago. A massive textile economy was absolutely booming in the American colonies, and it really did lay the groundwork for the entire nation's future. But here's the thing. The real story of who actually built this industry, the story of the women who did the hard labor in the fields and at the processing vats, well, that's been almost completely erased.
And that quote right there really says it all. So today, we're going to pull back that curtain. We're going to dig into that lost history, but we'll start with the story that's usually told.
The traditional story, the one that actually made it into the history books, it always begins with this celebrated, almost legendary figure.
Meet Eliza Lucas Pinckney. Now, at a time when women had very, very few public roles, she was a total powerhouse, a brilliant agriculturalist, and a really shrewd business operator.
She was born in the Caribbean, she got her education in England, and she lived most of her life in South Carolina. So her world, it really spanned the entire British Atlantic Empire.
And get this, she wasn't just living there. She was basically running the whole show. As a teenager, can you imagine? She was left in charge of her father's plantations. In a letter, she wrote about the immense business and fatigue of it all, which just goes to show how seriously she took that responsibility.
Eliza's big project was cracking the code of indigo. You see, Britain's textile mills were exploding, and they were desperate for blue dye, which made indigo an incredibly valuable commodity.
So she ran all these experiments, which she called her schemes, and she saw the massive potential. She wrote in 1740 that she had greater hopes from the indigo than from anything else she'd tried.
And wow, was she right. Her success helped set off an absolute explosion. In just 30 years, indigo exports from the colonies shot up tenfold. We're talking about a massive economic boom.
But that incredible success story, that huge number, it brings up a really fundamental question. We know who got all the credit, right? But who was it that actually did the backbreaking labor to make it all happen?
Okay, so let's move away from the plantation house for a minute. Let's head out to the fields and the processing vats to see how this brilliant blue dye was actually made.
And this is where the focus of the story really shifts. Because while planters like Eliza were managing the books, the brutal, physical, hands-on work of processing the indigo was done primarily by enslaved African American women. The work itself was just unbelievably intense. I mean, this was not simple farming. It was a grueling 12 to 15-hour industrial process. It involved steeping the plants, letting the liquid ferment, and then hours of what one planter actually called violent, constant stirring and beating, just to extract that precious dye.
And the conditions were just horrific. The stench that came from the fermenting vats was so powerful, so putrid, that owners would often build the processing areas a quarter-mile away from the main house. Think about that.
This labor left a physical mark. The same blue dye that was so prized over in Europe, it permanently stained the arms of the women who made it. And that sickening stench from the vats, it just clung to them, following them long after the workday was over.
The story doesn't stop with indigo. After the Revolutionary War, the whole colonial economy shifted, and so did the work of these incredible women. So, when the war came, the British subsidies for indigo just disappeared. Planters had to find something new. They turned to cotton. And then, in 1793, the invention of the cotton gin made it wildly profitable. Production just skyrocketed.
The rise of King Cotton led planters to a whole new economic model. The idea was to make the institution of slavery actually pay for itself, so the labor of enslaved people would cover all the costs of their own enslavement.
So how did they do this? By turning plantations into full-on textile factories. The very same women who had worked those indigo vats were now trained as spinners and weavers. They became this new class of highly skilled artisans.
And this was a totally systematic operation. We're talking weaving mills built on the plantations of really prominent men, like Thomas Jefferson. Girls as young as 10 were put to work at spinning wheels, and they produced all the cloth needed for the entire enslaved community, which was usually about 5 yards of coarse fabric per person each year. And very often, that fabric was dyed blue, with their old crop, indigo.
And through this really powerful memory from a formerly enslaved woman, Tempe Herndon Durham, we can almost hear it, can't we? The hum of the wheels, the sound of singing that filled those spinning rooms. It's just this incredible testament to the community and the culture that endured, even in these incredibly harsh conditions. So after all that, why does uncovering this forgotten chapter of American history matter so much? Why is this so important?
Because it completely rewrites the narrative that we tell ourselves. The enslaved women who are the true architects, the true laborers of this huge textile economy, first with indigo, then with cotton, they have been almost completely erased from the story of America's founding.
For modern weavers and researchers like Karen Hampton, who informed a lot of this explainer, rediscovering this history is a deeply personal thing. It's about finding that thread that connects the present to the past, and it's about reclaiming a legacy of artistry, of resilience, and of incredible labor.
And that leaves us with one final, pretty big question. If this entire history, a history this important, could be lost for so long, what other stories are still out there, just waiting to be told? Whose voices have we not yet heard?